Toby is a good friend, and he's the founder of Joplin Consulting Group, a consulting firm that helps organizations create, improve, and execute business strategies. Known by his friends, colleagues, and students as Dr. J, because of his love of basketball, he has been helping organizations become more successful for over 25 years. He's worked with companies as small as startups to as large as Quick Trip and Intuit. Dr. J is also the director of the University of Tulsa Graduate Business Programs, where he teaches the Capstone Business Strategy course. Dr. J formerly taught at Oklahoma State University. I remember when he moved over, that was a big deal. That was a big trade. In 2018, Dr. J was named the Outstanding Graduate School Professor on both OSU, Stillwater, and Tulsa campuses. He's the founder of an internet website that has been featured in numerous business publications, including Forbes, Business Week, Harvard Business Review, and others. Business Week named the website one of the top 50 uses of the web. In 2005, Dr. J earned his PhD from Oklahoma State and is certified to practice public accounting. He is also a strategic member of the Oklahoma Bankers Association. And I was literally telling the group before we started, we may ask him to come back every quarter because he has so much great material. He's such a good teacher, and I'm very honored to introduce my friend, Dr. Toby Joplin. Dr. J?
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for that kind introduction. You read it just the way I wrote it. I appreciate that for not deviating too much. You actually enhanced it a little bit, which is nice. So in the next 30 or 45 minutes, we're going to talk about how you can make your organization more successful next year than this year. You'll leave here today with 4 or 5 things that you can apply immediately to be more successful. And we'll talk through some of those things. Now, in the past, I've printed copies of my handouts, and to make sure I had enough handouts, I'd always print more than I needed, which means I would throw some away. And that didn't seem like a good stewardship, not very environmentally friendly. And let's face it, some people come to these lunches, spoiler alert, for the lunch and not the speaker. And so instead today what I'm doing is, if you'll fill out the form on your table, I will gladly email you a PDF copy of my slides and notes, and so you can have that for as long as you want them. Okay, let's get started. So, for you poetry lovers, some of you poetry lovers may remember that Lord Tennyson wrote that in the springtime of the year, a young man's fancy turns to love, right? You've heard that if you haven't read it. Well, what I've noticed over the last 25 years of working with businesses around the country is typically when we get to the fourth quarter, effective business leaders start thinking about, man, how can we make next year better than this year, right? Even if this year was pretty good, we're thinking, how can we make next year better? And if this year wasn't good, we're certainly trying to think about how we can make next year better. And it turns out that a lot of really smart people have been telling us that we should be thinking about where we want to go and how we're going to get there. They've been telling us that for thousands of years. 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Seneca said, you know, if you don't know which port you're headed towards, it doesn't matter which way the wind's blowing. And some of us are operating our businesses that way. We're getting up every day and just saying, you know, kind of making it up as we go. About 1,800 years later, Lewis Carroll, in his book, Alice in Wonderland, I like this scene from Alice in Wonderland. Alice says to the Cheshire Cat, would you tell me which way I ought to go from here? And the Cheshire Cat says, well, that depends on where you want to get to. And Alice says, I don't much care where I go. And the Cheshire Cat says, then it doesn't matter which way you go. Right? Well, I came of age in the 70s. Looking around the room, I see a couple of people that might be as old as me. And so I think of one of the great poets of my coming of age years, Diana Ross. She said, she asked a very profound question, and she said, do you know where you're going to? And do you like the things that life's showing you? And so that's my question for you today is, do you know where your organization's going? And do you like the things that life is telling you about your organization and where it's headed? A few years ago, Stephen Covey came out of a book where he kind of codified this and made it a little more academic or business-minded. He just says, we need to begin with the end in mind. Because here's the reality. Inside of each one of us, there's a little kid, right? There's a little kid that wants to know, where are we going and when are we going to get there? In fact, it's not just us. Our employees are looking to you as leaders to answer that question, and not just your employees. Many times your customers and your vendors and your lenders want to know the same thing. Where are we going and when are we going to get there? A professor in California several years ago did some research on goal setting. Professor Gail Matthews, and here's what she found. She said, when she surveyed a wide range of people, she found that 83% of people had no goal at all. 14% of people had goals in their head, but they'd never written them down. But just by having goals in our head, these people that had the goals in their mind were 10 times more successful than those with no goal. But here's the game changer. Of the people, the 3% that wrote down their goals, they had written goals, they had a written plan, they were 30 times more successful than people with no goals. That's what the research says. That's not my opinion. It's not someone's opinion. That's what the research and the data says. If you could be 30 times successful, why wouldn't you write down your goals and have a specific plan for how you're going to accomplish those goals? But, sometimes when we talk about strategy, we're a little intimidated in the sense, well, this sounds kind of complicated, this strategery stuff, I don't know, it seems complicated. A strategy is just a plan for getting from where you are as an organization to where you want to be. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Now, some of you are thinking, well, we tried that strategy stuff a few years ago. We tried that. It didn't really work for us. Let me ask you this. The first time you tried to walk, did you quit the first time you did a face plant? Right? I've got a 1-year-old granddaughter, and she does it about 12 times a day. She just recently started walking. No, you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you keep going. Right? In fact, failing is the whole idea behind strength training. If you lift weights, right, you put a certain amount of weight on the bar, and you lift, maybe you get 8 reps up until the point of failure. And then maybe the next time you get 9, and the next time 10, and then you put more weight on the bar. And so just because it didn't work in the past doesn't mean you shouldn't keep trying it. In fact, who can tell me who this is? Where's my baseball guys? Who is it? Ohtani, right? What do you know about him? My understanding is he's the only Major League Baseball player selected for the All-Star team as a pitcher and as a position player. He's a great pitcher and a great hitter.
I think he led the Angels in every category.
He's been compared to baseball greats like Babe Ruth. And here's the thing, he's one of the great baseball players of our time, and yet he only gets a hit about 3 out of every 10 times. You don't give up just because it didn't work one time. Now, some others of you are thinking, we're doing pretty good at our place. We kind of got it figured out. We don't need to be messing with perfection, right? When I was growing up, we bought everything at a store called Sears. We bought our school clothes there. We bought our appliances there. We bought our Craftsman tools there. And I'm told at its peak, Sears had 3,500 stores and they're down to 11. I haven't seen a Sears store lately. Maybe you have. Not many left. And they were the largest retailer in the world. Some of us old-timers remember Hojo's, Howard Johnson's. They were literally the largest restaurant chain in the United States. At one time had over 1,000 stores. They closed their last restaurant in 2022. Most of you can remember Blockbuster. They were the largest video chain. They had over 9,000 retail locations. And there's one Blockbuster left in the Pacific Northwest, and it's basically a museum. A tourist stop. My point is, you better have a healthy level of paranoia. Just because you've been successful in the past doesn't mean you have been in the future. Tulsa was a pretty happening place about 100 years ago. Lots of good things going on, but I'm really proud of what it's become. I think many of you are too. But Tulsa has become the city that it is because of organizations like yours. And the type of city that it's going to be in the future is going to be determined by organizations like yours. My financial advisor tells me every time he brings me an investment, He slides the forms across the table. I notice in every form it says, past performance is no guarantee of future success. And the same is true for your business. No matter how successful you've been in the past, that's no guarantee. Good for you if you've been successful. Good for you, you've been doing things right. But what we did in the past doesn't guarantee our success in the future. Abe Lincoln, one of my favorite leaders, said the best way to predict the future is to create it. Now, there are some things that are outside of our control, right? We can't control what's going on in the Middle East. We can't control inflation. We can't control interest rates. In fact, your banker can't control interest rates. But we discount too often the number of things that are within our control. 100 years later, Peter Drucker plagiarized Abe Lincoln and said the exact same thing. Drucker's one of the great management leaders in the last 100 years. In August, I had the privilege of hearing James Clear speak at the Global Leadership Conference in Chicago. And he said this, and it's very simple, and it's very profound. He says, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our plan or our system. And so it's great if you have goals in your head, but just because we have a goal in our head doesn't mean we're accomplish it. We fall to the level of our plan, our system. It is essential to have a plan. Now, all organizations plan. Some are more formal, some are less formal, right? I'm a Chiefs fan. I actually was born in Kansas City. And so I'm a Chiefs fan, and I'm amazed by Patrick Mahomes. The play is never over, and a little whistle blows with him. He can pull a rabbit out of a hat, right? And yet, Forbes magazine said that the Chiefs and the Bills, two of the two most prolific offenses last year, often game plan their offensive plays, script those even to the second half. Even with the great quarterbacks they have, they're just not showing up on game day and say, well, let's figure it out. Everybody go out and I'll hit whoever's open. Sometimes it looks that way with Mahomes. But they've got very detailed plans. In fact, Andy Reid is one of the most cerebral coaches in the NFL. If they think they need to script the offensive plays into the second half with Patrick Mahomes under center, chances are you need a plan too. Now, disclaimer. There are hundreds of books on strategic planning. Hundreds. Here's the good news. You don't have to read them. I have. And the thing that can be confusing for the layperson is some of these different resources for strategy use slightly different terms, slightly different definitions, and it can be confusing. It can be frustrating. You're like, well, I thought this was our vision. This is our purpose. I'm confused, right? Gino Wickman came out with a program called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, made popular through his book Traction. Great program where he's kind of signed some new terms. Instead of having objectives, you have rocks, and you have level 10 meetings. And it's basically new wine in old wineskins. It's great program, but it's basically the same steps that Michael Porter and Jim Collins were telling us about 40 years ago. And basically, if you're to create an effective strategy, you start with broad, timeless principles like your core values, the vision you have for your organization. You do some type of analysis so you can make decisions based on the facts and not your opinions. And you're not finished until you turn those into action plans that are assigned to specific people with specific due dates that can be quantified. Regardless of what resource or what program you use for strategy, this is the steps. So this is the model I've used. I borrowed it from Jim Collins literally 25 years ago. I was telling one of the guys at my table earlier, I was at a lunch just like this, very similar to this. It was a Christian businessman's lunch in the late 90s. And the speaker that day was a guy who was the president of Zepco, Jim Dawson. And he mentioned in passing that he felt like one of Zepco's strengths was their ability to create and execute effective business strategy. Well, this is before email. I didn't know you didn't do this. So I just called up Zepco and said, hey, can I talk to Jim Dawson? And they're like, who is this? And so, long story short, in a couple days, Jim's executive assistant called me back and said, Jim would be glad to meet with you. He sat down with me for 2 hours, walked me through how Zepco creates strategy, very closely aligned with the things Jim Collins and Michael Porter teaches. This is a model I've been using for 25 years to make organizations successful. It just works. And so we'll go through each of these steps in a little bit of more detail so that you have something actionable when you leave here today. So these are some of the organizations I've worked with over the last 25 years. Some of these names you recognize, some you don't. Everything from startups and nonprofits to organizations as large as $16 billion in revenue a year. And so chances are, I'm just guessing, that all of your organizations have revenue somewhere between 0 and 16 billion. And so this program will work for you. This process will work for you regardless of the size of your organization. So why do we create a strategy? Why bother? It takes time and resources. We're busy fighting the fires every day. Why do you do that? Well, we already talked about, we're trying to begin with the end in mind. We want to define the direction of the business, right? We want to, have you noticed the world's changing? We want to be responsive to change. We want to be proactive and not reactive, right? We want to try to get out ahead of the curve. I already quoted the research, the data that says if you have a written plan, you're 30 times more likely to be successful than if you don't have a written plan. So you improve the odds of success dramatically if you have a written strategy. It's hard for your employees to know how to support your dreams and your goals if they're all in your head. But if you write it down clearly and quantify it and communicate it, your employees can rally around that plan and they will enhance it. They'll think of things you didn't think of. They'll say, you know, that's good, but have we thought about this? And they'll make your plan even better because no one of us is as smart as all of us, right? All reasons to create a strategy. So, a lot of times when I get a new client, they'll say, you know, listen, I heard you talk at this event the other day and we'd like you to help us with our strategy. And so I'll go meet with them. They want to sit down and make some decisions. There's actually 3 phases of strategic management. Before you can make decisions, you need to do some analysis, right? Too many organizations want to go straight to decisions without adequately analyzing the world around them and their strengths and weaknesses. Then you make decisions. The other thing I see where organizations fail is they don't execute well. They will come up with a great plan, they'll put it on that 3-ring binder or save it on their computer, and then they just get busy, right? They just get busy. This is a little bit sobering. Forbes magazine said only 10% of strategies effectively planned or effectively executed. The plan was fine in most cases, but people just get busy. And so many times it's helpful to have a Sherpa to guide you through the execution phase as well. So you need to not underinvest in analyzing and executing. So we'll start with the vision. Our vision's comprised of our values, our purpose, and our mission. Now, I already told you that different resources, different sources define these things a little bit differently. So I'm going to give you this tool to help you differentiate between those 3 components of our vision. This is something Jim Collins actually came up with. No surprise, our core values are just 3 to 5 guiding principles that before you would consciously violate a core value, you would walk away from a great business opportunity, maybe a great job opportunity. You just wouldn't consciously violate that. And typically your core values never change. I get concerned if I'm working with an organization, they want to change their core values, every 5 years. And you typically only have a handful. You don't have 152 core values, right? You don't have that many things that rise to that high threshold. A level up from our values is our purpose. Our purpose is like our North Star or our compass. We're always pursuing our purpose, but we never completely fulfill it as long as we're in business, right? You don't ever really fully accomplish your purpose. It should last your organization for 100 years. Up a level from our purpose is our mission. This gets much more specific in a much tighter time frame. A mission is typically quantifiable, is clearly defined, it has a clear finish line or target date. You absolutely know when it's accomplished. It's not vague. And typically it has a time horizon of 5 to 10 years. With my clients, we're leaning more towards 5 years now than 10. Since COVID and everything going on in the world, we're just finding that things are changing faster. We have to reset our goal or mission more frequently. So one of the organizations I work with is Quick Trip. Everybody knows Quick Trip here in Tulsa. A very values-driven company. A couple years ago, I worked on a project with Quick Trip where I was actually on site for months. And so I had an internal Quick Trip email. And one of the things I noticed at Quick Trip is, you can imagine with over 1,000 locations, there's emails going out frequently announcing promotions and employees being moved around. Every time they send that email, They say Bob Smith, Susan Jones is being moved into this position because, and they give specific examples of what they've done to live out Quick Trip's core values. If you're an employee at Quick Trip and you don't understand that their values are important and that's how they run their business, then you're not paying attention. They frame everything around their values and their purpose. So again, a level up from our values is our purpose. It's like that, our compass or our North Star. Simon Sinek says that successful businesses have five components. And one of those is what he calls a just cause. We can frame our purpose as a just cause. It doesn't make, one of the companies I've worked with makes rubber hoses and floor mats. You can frame your purpose as a just cause regardless of what your product or service is. It may feel like a commodity. You can frame it as a just cause. I was talking to James. I didn't know I was going to be giving examples about purpose and use GE as an example, and I'd have somebody who worked on strategy for GE. It's a little intimidating. But at one time, GE's tagline, their purpose was, "We bring good things to life." Does anybody remember that? Running commercials, GE, we bring good things to life. What does GE sell? Appliances, light bulbs, plane engines, right? But their purpose, they were able to frame as we bring good things to life. And I think it's accurate. You know what? I'm pretty happy if my GE appliances come on and work. So whatever your purpose is, your organization, you can frame as a noble cause. Quick Trip's purpose is to provide an opportunity for their employees to grow and succeed. I like that. And it's a little unusual because it's very internally focused. Most purpose statements are externally focused towards the world or community or customers. Theirs is internally focused, but let's think about it. What does Quick Trip have to do you think, to provide an opportunity for their employees to grow and succeed? Got to open new locations. If you're opening new locations and you stay profitable, my guess is that's good for shareholders, owners. It's good for customers, right? And so they're better serving all three of their stakeholder groups with this purpose statement. Remember, the third component of our vision is our mission. Our mission. Mission is essential because here's what I know. In every business, ebbs and flows. There's times you go through that are tough. I've heard some of you in this room talk about circumstances in your business that were very difficult. And when you're sitting up at 2 in the morning trying to figure out how to keep the business afloat or make it more successful, man, why am I doing this? You can go back to your mission and go, oh yeah, we have to accomplish this by December 31st, 2025, and what I'm doing tonight at 2 in the morning is going to help me accomplish that. The other reason a mission is important is we have to make decisions. We all have limited resources. Every organization has limited time, limited financial assets, and so if you have option A or option B and you're struggling with that decision, you can just boil it down to which one of these options is going to move us closer to fulfilling our mission, to make it more likely we fulfill our mission. So if Quick Trip decides to expand in another state, I just picked Michigan and Florida, they can look and say which one of these is going to provide more opportunities for our employees to grow and succeed. Make sense? Here's some examples. I'm not going to go through these in the interest of time. Your mission is like a big, hairy, audacious goal. You've probably all heard that term. A big, hairy, audacious goal. So Google's mission, their big, hairy, audacious goal is to organize the world's information. Right? Tesla, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. SpaceX, enable human exploration and settlement of Mars. Think about how you can frame that mission, that big, hairy, audacious goal for your company that you want to accomplish in the next 5 years or so. Now let me give you a couple of examples. I'm going to give you an example of a company that I think didn't get it and a company that does get it. So a few years ago, I went in to pick up my shirts at the dry cleaners, and the young lady was at the counter, and I was making conversation. I said, "Hey, how's it going?" She goes, "Oh, it's great. It's really slow." Like, what? She says it's great, it's really slow. I bet the owners don't think it's great that it's really slow. I would suggest she doesn't share the vision of the owners. I'm just guessing. Now, one of the companies I work with frequently is House Smith Restaurants. You guys know House Smith, right? They have mahogany in Charleston, Red Rock, about 12 different restaurant concepts. And inside of every one of their restaurants, they have a plaque that says, our mission is to consistently exceed our guest expectations. And I saw that, and it dawned on me at some point, whenever I go to Charleston's, they never ask me, will this table be okay? They say, will this table be perfect? They never say, is your food okay? They say, is your meal excellent? Here's a specific example. So a couple years ago, my wife and I were remodeling our house, and the contractor called up on Friday. He goes, hey, I'm sorry, I got some bad news. Oh, what's this? He says, well, I know we're supposed to finish all your remodel today, but some of the materials come in, I can't fix it. I said, that's a big problem. I got 20 people coming over for dinner on Sunday night, and all my furniture's stacked up in the living room. He said, there's nothing I can do. The material didn't come in, I can't make it appear. All right. Well, whenever my wife and I have a really good day or a really bad day, we go to Charleston's. We really like Charleston's. They have a really good filet, and it's modestly priced. You know, it's not super expensive. It's really good. So we loaded up the car and we went to Charleston's. We get to Charleston's and ordered the filet like we always do. And the server, like the servers always do at Charleston, when they brought our filet out, said, would you mind cutting into your steak to make sure it's perfect? Let me remind you, my wife has had a day. She's pretty exasperated. She's still trying to figure out how she's going to host dinner for 20 people with all of our furniture in a pile in the living room. And so my wife cuts into her steak and she says, it's fine. And the server steps back and says, I'm so sorry. Fine's not good enough at Charleston's. Would you like us to remake your meal? And as someone who teaches this and coaches businesses, I was like, can I hug you? Oh my gosh. This is an employee that understands their mission is to consistently, not meet, exceed their guests' expectations. They got it. They get it at Charleston's. Some of you have heard this story. A guy's walking down the street past this huge construction site. Walking down the street, walks past one construction worker. He asks the worker, he says, so what are you doing here? The construction worker looks up and goes, I'm laying bricks. Big construction site. Walks a little further down the street, asks the next construction worker, so what are you doing here? The second construction worker goes, I'm laying bricks. Hello. Gets down to the end of the street, asks the last construction worker, he says, so what are you doing here? The last construction worker steps back and looks at the building and goes, I'm building a cathedral. That's the difference between employees with vision and those without. Your employees, if they have a vision, they're building a cathedral. They're part of something great. If they don't share your vision, they're just bricklayers. They're just digging a hole and filling it up. Vision is essential. Sometimes I'll talk to groups, I'll be working with a client, and they'll say, man, you spend a lot of time on vision. I said, because it's that important, and we tend to discount it because that's the soft, touchy-feely stuff. And it's especially true of Gen Z. Gen Z gets a lot of criticism for certain things, but here's one thing I know about Gen Z, because I spend every day with them, teaching them. They are waiting to be a part of something great and waiting to be inspired. If you will share a vision with them that they can get excited about, they will be all over it. They want to be a part of something great. I think more so than my generation. We were willing to go in and work 12 hours a day just because that's what you did. Vision's important. So after we have understand and clearly communicated our vision, we'll do a SWOT analysis, right? We'll look at our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities and threats. Let me ask you this. Does anybody recognize this guy? I'm a basketball guy more than a baseball guy. But anybody recognize this person? Shaquille O'Neal. What do you know about Shaq Daddy? He's a big old boy, as we would say in Oklahoma. He's a big old boy. Good to shoot free throws. You're right about that. Here's what I know. He played in the NBA 19 years. He made the NBA All-Star team 15 years. He won 4 NBA championships. Made a lot of money playing basketball. Can we agree that Shaq is a great athlete? Or he was? Can we agree on that? I would argue that even at the height of his physical prowess, Shaq would have been a horrible jockey. No matter how often Shaq's mom said, oh, Shaq, you love horses, you just keep practicing. Oh, Shaq, you just keep working on it, you'll get it. Shaq is never going to win the Kentucky Derby, right? Shaq knows his strengths is to play with his back to the goal and to stick his arm in the rim up to the elbow and try not to get fouled because he's going to miss the free throws. Your organization needs to do the same thing. Understand your strengths and play to those strengths. Don't try to be somebody you're not that requires you. I teach at the University of Tulsa. I can tell you that the University of Tulsa is the smallest Division I university in the United States. We have about 4,000 students. About 10%, about 8% of our student population are varsity athletes. When I got to the University of Tulsa and they asked me to help with our master's programs in the College of Business, I noticed they spent a lot of time apologizing for not being a big state school. Well, they're not one of the big state schools, and they'd like to come up with all these excuses or apologies for that. And I'm like, stop. Stop trying to be somebody you're not. You know what's great about the University of Tulsa? We have small class sizes, low faculty to student ratios, individualized attention, and concierge level service. As the master or the director of the MBA program, I know the name of every one of my students. The person at the University of Oklahoma State University, where I got all 3 of my degrees, Matt Bowler, great guy, they have a good program. They have 400 MBA students. He cannot possibly know the names of all his students. Quit apologizing for not being OU or OSU, and let's promote who we are. And so if you look at our social media posts, our advertising, it says we have small class sizes, low faculty to student ratios, concierge level service. My students come in to me and they say, I'm interested in doing this when I graduate. I say, I know a guy. I happen to bring one of my star MBA students with me today, James Head, who is a literal rock star. And here's what I know. Because I know James Head, he wants to move into sports management when he graduates from the University of Tulsa. So if you know somebody with opportunities in sports management, you need to contact James Head, because he's going to make that organization more successful. And if I had 400 students, I couldn't know that. Don't try to apologize for what you're not. Embrace your strengths. You know the idea of SWOT. We look internally at our strengths and weaknesses, externally at opportunities and threats, and try to figure out how to create a strategy around that. Now, recently I've spent more time helping my clients understand their undiscovered assets. Many times as organizations, we're sitting on something extremely valuable, we don't know it. How many of you know the story of Spindletop? Anybody know Spindletop? Spindletop was an oil gusher, Beaumont, Texas, hit in 1901. When they hit Spindletop, it spewed oil 100 feet in the air for 9 days. It flowed 100,000 barrels a day for that 9 days until they capped it. 100,000 barrels a day for 9 days. It flowed more oil in those 9 days than every other oil well did in Texas for the previous year. In one day, the 3 families that owned the land that Spindletop was on, the McFadden's, Weiss's, and Kyle's, became instant millionaires. January 10th, 1901, became instant millionaires that day. Or did they? Didn't they own those same assets the day before? Maybe they became millionaires when they signed the oil lease, or when they bought those dirt farms. My point is, some of your organizations are sitting on assets that you don't realize, and you need someone to help you discover those. Sometimes we get so myopic, we see it every day that we don't realize it. Here's another example closer to home. All of you know Williams Companies, and most of you will probably remember that back in the 30, 40 years ago, when the telecom boom was hitting, that Williams looked around and said, man, what assets do we have we could be doing more with? And they said, we've got thousands of miles in decommissioned pipelines. Doesn't seem that valuable unless you run fiber through them and there's a telecom boom. They spun off 2 different telecom companies for billions of dollars using decommissioned pipelines. Some of you guys need to figure out what your decommissioned pipeline is. How many of you have heard of Zero Hour Bomb Company? A few? You know Zero Hour Bomb Company? Yeah, you all do. You all do. They made explosive devices for the oil field. Oh, maybe you know them by their more current product, their more current name, Zebco fishing reels. They had good engineers, and they came up with a pretty good fishing reel, and they don't make too many oil field bombs anymore. Figure out what your undiscovered assets are. So after we look internally, we look externally, what's going on demographics, it seems like where I live, they're building an assisted living center on every corner. We have an aging workforce. What's that going to do to your business? What's going on socially? What's going on in Oklahoma City or Washington that may affect your business politically? Hey, do you notice that technology's changing? Is artificial intelligence going to help your business or hurt it? Is it a threat or an opportunity? Yes. If you don't think technology is important, I've got some excellent training videos on VHS I want to send you. Talk to me after lunch. What's going on in the economy, right? We can't control that, but we have to be able to respond to it when inflation's high, interest rates go up. And one thing, it's a global economy. Used to, if you were doing a little business here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you weren't so affected by things overseas, but now most of us get things from China or from Europe. What's going on in the general environment? Only after we've done our SWOT analysis can we come up with an effective strategy. Remember, strategy is just a journey. It's just figuring out how we're going to get from where we are to where we want to be. This surprises a lot of people. There's only 3 types of strategy. Only 3. We can try to be the low-cost leader. Notice I didn't say necessarily low price, but we had the low-cost structure. So in the grocery industry, that would probably be a store like Walmart, cost leadership model. We can compete on differentiation by being so different than our competitors. Whole Foods might be an example. A while back I went to a social event. I was supposed to bring an appetizer. I stopped at Whole Foods and I just said, hey, just fix me a cheese plate with some amazing cheeses. And I get to the folks' house, we were going to do it. The cheeses were amazing. It was so good. So a couple weeks later, we were going to another event. I live in Owasso, and I thought, oh, let's do another cheese tray. That was so good. We don't have a Whole Foods in Owasso, so we went to Walmart and picked up a cheese tray. And get to the place, I'm like, not the same. Walmart absolutely competing on cost, not necessarily differentiation. The third type of strategy we can have is focus. We can focus on a narrow niche, a product, a narrow geographic region, that type of thing. Sprouts might be an example of that. So some of us old-timers can remember A&P was the largest grocery chain in the United States. In fact, until 1965, it was the largest retailer in the United States. They eventually failed because they weren't the mostest at anything. They had pretty good prices, but not the cheapest. So if you were competing if you wanted to buy based on price, you went to Walmart or someplace like that. They had pretty good variety, but not the most variety. They kind of got caught in the middle. And so people that valued one of those things, whether it was a variety or price, went somewhere else. Pick a strategy. 4 things to keep in mind. First of all, your strategy needs to be consistent with your vision. Remember, values, purpose, mission. As you come up with your strategy, there should be a consistency. When I see the most effective strategies, there's some common theme that weaves us through all levels of the strategic process. It should leverage your strengths. We just talked about that. And it has to be realistic. If I say I have a strategy to get in better health, and part of my strategy is to run 5-minute miles. Nope, not happening. Your strategy has to be realistic, and your employees need to believe it's realistic, which is why the vision is so important. And to the extent possible, you should create your strategy with the participation of the people who are going to be on the line to make it happen. Now, I challenge my clients to think big. Most of us, don't set our goals high enough. So I give you these examples of wet blankets throughout history, some organizations or people whose spirit animal was Eeyore. So when Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, he went to Western Union and he tried to pitch them on this idea of a telephone, and Western Union said, the telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is of no value. I bet every one of you have a phone in your pocket, and if you'd gotten here for lunch and realized you didn't have it, you'd gone home or back to the office to get your phone. You can't do without it, but Western Union didn't need one. Fred Smith, who's the founder of FedEx, wrote a paper when he was in school at Yale for this idea he had for an overnight delivery service. And this professor, you know who those professors are, his professor gave him a C. He said, because to earn better than a C, the idea has to actually be feasible. That seemed to work out okay for Fred. I see a lot of FedEx trucks going down the street. Warner Brothers, back in the days of silent movies, said, who the hell wants to hear actors talk? Me? I'm going to go see Killers of the Flower Moon next week. I don't want to sit there for 3.5 hours with no sound. Finally, Bill Bowerman, who along with Phil Knight was a co-founder of Nike, they come up with this idea for a running shoe with a waffle sole. So they go to the sporting shoe company, and they're pitching their running shoe, and they said, to build. We don't tell you how to coach, don't tell us how to make shoes. You know, I've been around for a while. I remember the first Walmart store I ever saw was in Mena, Arkansas. And back then they weren't these big super centers like they are now. They're closer to like a Dollar General store. They weren't well lit and stuff, sitting in the aisles and stuff. And if you'd have told me back then that Walmart would be the largest retailer in the world, the largest brick and mortar retailer in the world, and it would be headquartered in Bentonville, Arkansas, I would have laughed you out of the room. All right, let's do an exercise. Let's do an exercise here. All right, how good's your hand-eye coordination? All right. So I'm assigning you to come up with an idea worth $1 million. What organization are you with, Brent? SecTech. All right. So if you have to come up with a new idea worth $1 million, would you rather start with your organization and the people there and the assets you may have, or a head of lettuce?
My organization.
Good answer. Thank you. Good answer. I like this example. You know, as a kid, there were two kinds of lettuce. You go to the store, you got leaf lettuce or iceberg lettuce. Now when I go to the store to get lettuce, I'm like paralyzed. There's like 30 different blends. I'm like, I don't know. Gary Hammelman's book, Leading the Revolution, wrote, you can't put a computer chip in lettuce, you can't send lettuce over the internet, yet the market for pre-washed, pre-cut, pre-packaged lettuce grew from nothing in the late 1980s to 1.4 billion in 2000. Send an email to everyone on your management team. If someone could create a $1.4 billion market for lettuce, what the hell's our excuse? Lettuce! I don't care what business you're in or what your organization is, you got more going on than lettuce, I'm guessing. You know, here in Tulsa, most of us are pretty fond of this musical called Oklahoma, right? I've really missed Discoveryland, being able to go out there and see the musical. Some of you may remember that in the musical Oklahoma, there's a song that said, everything's up to date in Kansas City, they've gone about as far as they can go. For some of you, that's your mentality in your organization, like, yep, we've arrived, we're there, yeehaw. And if you think you've arrived, you're done. If you're not getting better, you're going away. I spend more time in recent years trying to help my clients figure out what their purple cow is. That term may not be meaningful to you. It's a term that came up, was developed by Seth Godin. Seth and his family live in New York. And they were traveling in France a few years ago, rural France with his family. And being from Manhattan, you don't see a lot of cows in New York City. And so they're driving through rural France. They're like, oh my gosh, a cow! A few miles farther, a cow! And Seth writes in his book, he says, you know, after about 30 minutes, there'd be like, the cow, big whoop. But he says, you know, if we'd seen a purple cow, that would have caught our eye. And his point is, in our businesses, we need a product or service that is our purple cow. We need a remarkable idea or product that will so differentiate yours from your competitors that they wouldn't consider going anywhere else. And let me give you some ideas on how to do that. There's a book called The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. They said that the most important events, the most epic events in our life are typically centered around beginnings, endings, peaks, and valleys. You can create a purple cow by understanding what the beginnings, endings, peaks, and valleys are for your customers or clients and magnifying or enhancing those events. So a couple of quick examples. Magic Castle Hotel in Southern California is a pretty ordinary hotel in most aspects. It's not new. It has been kept up to date, but it's not new. Nothing particularly spectacular. But they consistently have the highest customer satisfaction ratings, guest ratings. And then the comments, what people almost always write is, oh my gosh, out by the pool they have a red telephone, and if you pick it up, someone on the other end says, Popsicle Hotline, how may I help you? And I can say, I want a great popsicle. And somebody, a hotel employee will come out with a silver tray and a white glove and deliver a great popsicle poolside. How simple is that? But their guests have gone nuts over that. Another example, Yes Prep Academy is a high school in Houston area, and the founders, when they started it, they said, you know, we make such a big deal when our athletes sign their national letter of intent at a big signing day, they put on the hat or the shirt or whatever, I'm going to be attending the University of Oklahoma, University of Tulsa, you know, whatever. What if we could create an event like that for all students, not just the athletes? And so they did, And so at Yes Prep Academy, you're not required to go to college, but you're required to apply for college. And they have a national signing day at the end of their senior year where the students each walk across the stage with their hat or their shirt or their pennant and say, I've decided next year I'm going to be studying engineering at Oklahoma State University. And it's become so popular that they live stream it. They had to move to a bigger venue. It is epic, epic. Southwest Airlines is famous for this. You guys probably saw this story in the last year or so. This couple was flying from Dallas to Vegas to get married. And they had an appointment at one of these wedding chapels. They get to DFW and American Airlines canceled their flight. They were going to miss their wedding venue. And then someone told them, hey, there's a flight leaving on Southwest Airlines in an hour from Love Field. So they're racing over to Love Field, running through the airport in their wedding apparel, and get on the plane, and they make the plane, but they realize we're still not going to get there in time. And people are asking on the flight attendants like, what, you're wearing wedding dress? What's going on here? So they explained it to them. Just so happened there was a minister on the plane. And so they held a wedding at 30,000 feet. It was picked up by every major news outlet, broadcast around the world in print, online, video, all the networks. Southwest Airlines took what was going to be a horrible event in the lives of this couple and turned it into something that they will never forget. You could do the same thing for your organization. What are the beginnings, endings, peaks, and valleys? I'll tell you something. One of the organizations that's best equipped to do that are banks. You know what? I remember when I went down and opened, I was in grade school, and opened my passbook check or savings account at First Bank of Owasso back when it was a cow town. When I bought my first car, I went and saw my banker. My wife and I got married, we had to combine our accounts. I went and saw my banker. All right? When we bought our first house, who do you think I went and saw? My banker. All right? When my parents got older and we had to take over their affairs, I went and saw the banker. Regardless of what business you're in, identify what the beginnings, endings, peaks, and valleys are for your organizations and how you can magnify those. All right, once we come up with strategy, we create objectives. So based on our values, purpose, and mission, in light of our strengths and weaknesses, we set certain objectives. Products, customers, financial, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years. What are the goals you want to accomplish, right? But just having a goal doesn't make it happen. You know, I can go, I want to lose some weight. I got to do something, right? You got to make it happen. So one way to make that more likely, we've heard it till it's a cliche, SMART goals, but most people set goals that are too vague. Casualness creates casualties. You have to get more specific than you ever imagined. But again, if I have a goal to improve my health, what's wrong with that goal? Mick? Too vague, right? What does that mean, improve my health? Does it mean I'm going to lose weight, lower my cholesterol, I exercise 5 times a week? When am I going to improve my health? Next year, tomorrow, next week? You have to make it specific. So what I would do is convert my objective into an action plan and say, I want to lose 10 pounds by the first of the year. Well, I know if I limit my calorie intakes to 1,500 a day, do 45 minutes of cardio 5 times a week, no more than 1 cheat meal, I will lose the weight. Here's how I know that. I lost 40 pounds since February. Doing this. Well, it's going to be like a nice story, Dr. J, but I don't know how to apply that to my business. Thank you for asking. So I worked in the software industry for many years with Intuit and with a company here in Tulsa called Task Force. Some of you guys know the guys that ran that, Tim Clare and Tim Redmond. And so let's say we have a software business, we want to increase our revenues by $1 million. Well, if we know our average software sales $10,000, if we go out and demo the software 100 times, we'll get 2 sales. Well, how do we get to 100 demos? If we get 2 demos for every 100 cold calls or direct mail pieces we send or click-throughs on Google Ads, well then I know I just need 250,000 cold calls, direct mails, and click-throughs, that's some combination, then I'll get 5,000 demos. If I get 5,000 demos, I'll get 100 sales. And if I get 100 sales, I'll get $1 million. For most of your objectives, you can convert them to action plans just like that. Next, we have to keep score. You have to keep score. You have to measure your progress. I like to use 4 disciplines of execution. There's not much new in the world. The first is focus on the wildly important. I would rather see an organization with 3 wildly important goals than 13 moderately important goals. Act on lead measures. What's the difference between a lead measure and a lag measure, do you think? Lead measures are measures or metrics that you're tracking that predict your future. Lag measures are things that happened in the past. I'm a recovering accountant, a CPA, and so I love financial statements. I think they're essential, they're valuable, but if you're running your business only on your financial statements, it's like driving, looking in the rearview mirror, right? When I first got out of college, I worked for a little company called Otasco, and my job was 80% travel, and so I thought, I'm going to be on the road a lot. I think I'm going to get a radar detector. But I just got out of college, so I didn't have a lot of money, so I got a cheap radar detector. Here's what I know about cheap radar detectors. They tell you when you're getting a ticket. Radar detector would go off, I just pull over. Some of you, that's the way you're running the business. You're driving in the rearview mirror, and by the time you get the metrics, it's too late to adjust. You need to use lead measures. Keep a compelling scoreboard. I'm a basketball guy. Sean mentioned in my intro, my students call me Dr. J because I use lots of basketball analogies. Here's what I know. If we were to get a basketball, I have one in the trunk of my car, I always do. Go next door to the church, start shooting baskets on the go. We might be throwing up trick shots and bouncing off our knee, goofing around. But if we split into two teams and we kept score and we put time on the clock, we would play the game differently. Even if you don't like basketball, even if you've never played basketball, even if you don't like sports, if we keep score and know how much time's left in the game, we will play at a different level. Your employees will play at a different level if they know how you're keeping score and how much time's left in the game. Keep score and communicate it to your employees. The last of the 4 disciplines is to create a cadence of accountability. Many of us kind of lock up, we tighten up, we're like, we're going to be held accountable. Probably none of you, if someone comes to you and goes, hey, I just want to let you know, I'm going to be holding you accountable. You're like, oh, great, I've been hoping for that, right? All accountability is getting together and reporting on our prior commitments. Hey, here's what I said I was going to do by when, here's where I'm at. Then we're going to look at what adjustments we need to make, right? What adjustments do we need to make? And what are we going to do going forward? It's just getting together, saying, here's what I said I'd do when I said I'm going to do it. Learn from our successes and our failures. Hey, here's what worked well, let's keep doing that. This didn't work, let's change. How do we keep it moving going forward, get back on schedule? And some companies do this with weekly meetings, quarterly meetings. A lot of retail places have daily huddles. I work with Volvo, and in their manufacturing plants, they have a huddle at the beginning of every shift where they get everybody together and say, hey, here's what you need to know about this shift. We all play the game differently. We know the score and how much time's left. Finally, lastly, you're like, is this guy ever going to finish? You got to communicate it. You got to communicate it. George Bernard Shaw said the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it happened. And some of you are thinking like, listen, I get all this, Dr. J. My employees should understand this. I told them in 1995. Everything you say, every decision you make needs to be framed in terms of your strategy, your values, your purpose, your mission. Jim Collins, who is one of my favorite management researchers, says, most leaders are poor communicators. It's not that they aren't capable of communicating, they just don't do it. We get busy with all the fires going on around us. We're going around playing whack-a-mole, trying to get through the day. And we get to the end of the year like, wow, we really haven't talked about our plan with our employees for a long time. You have to communicate and re-communicate your vision in everything you do. Quick Trip and Hal Smith get it. And that's why they're successful. That's the plan. That's all you got to do. Nothing new. Again, this stuff's all 40 years old. Some of the great thought leaders in strategy have been doing this for 40 years. So that's all I got. Any questions?
You said you're going to email this out?
Yeah, if you'll fill out the form, so I have your email address, I'll send you the PDFs on that and my notes and everything. I'm glad to answer questions. This is what I do. It was much more lucrative for me to be a CFO than to work in academia. So I love talking about this. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have today or later.
Let's go ahead.
All right.
So you guys got a lot out of that. So we have some door prizes here. $50 gift card, looks like there's 2 of them.